Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Advocacy. Tonight, we have two of our newer members joining us. We have Lisa Wilson and we have Keisha Godwin. So, tonight's show, we want to talk about the IEP process. We know that when you hear IEP, most people run and hide in the corner. Most people shut down because it's a lot for parents to go through, especially when you're not really knowledgeable about the process. So Keisha and Lisa have been very instrumental in participating in a lot of IEP meetings, even talking to parents, helping them to understand the process. So we thought this would be great for us to have a show just to talk about some of the things that we're that they're seeing with the parents, and then just to give some baseline advice and some baseline information on IEPs. And with that being said, I'm gonna turn that over to them and give them the floor so that they can start off with the session. Ladies.
Hey, Paula. Hey, Lisa. Thank you for having us on tonight. Lisa and for those who don't know, we both are special education ambassadors. Some might say disability advocates, but we are ambassadors. We recently we met and we've been working together. Assisting some families with their children's or their loved ones IEPs, and we've had a lot of time to spend together and just discuss our experience over the years and some of the things that we feel would be essential for parents to know as their place or their position as an IET member, when it comes down to setting those goals and putting those things in place for their children. So we thought about it and we said, why don't we talk about the legal framework of an IEP? Because most parents, they come to the table and they're really not really sure even what an IEP is. They know it's goals to set and they know, this is what their child is supposed to be getting, but they don't know things to ask for as far as the data to prove that their child is actually getting what the goals that were set, and those type of things. So this is where we're at. And Lisa, I don't know how you want to start this off.
Good evening. I have my little furry friends here. So, good evening to everyone. I'm just so happy to be here. One of the first things I wanted to talk about, anyone who knows me, you all know that I operate from the legal framework, which is the trifecta of IDEA and Title II of the ADA, American with Disabilities Act, and Section 504 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act as amended. So that's the trifecta that I work, the framework that I work within. But I want to give parents something today that I've learned that many people may not be aware of, is that children have constitutional rights. And they may not have the full breadth of the constitutional rights that we enjoy as adults, but they do. And those rights fall under the Fifth and 14th Amendment. Now, I don't want you to be confused because we know as a part of the administrative procedure, parents have a right to proceed through a due process hearing. That's not the due process we're talking about. We're talking about the due process that's associated with the US Constitution. And just to give you the legal case where it was established, the name of it is Goss, Goss v. Lopez, 1975. And so one of the things that the Constitution asserts is that no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without the due process of the law. And understanding that education through Goss v. Lopez, 1975, it established that education is both a property and a liberty right under the US Constitution. And so I just want to start there. I just wanted to give you all that information. I think it's very important because I believe that parents can be empowered when they understand the full breadth of their rights. And so when you go to an IEP meeting and when you're asking and soliciting services for your children so that they can have equity and equitable educational experience, you're not doing so because you're not seeking favor. You're not asking for special privileges. These are legal rights that are fundamentally extended to your children through a series of laws. I just like to hone in on the trifecta. But tonight, if we can open up, Keisha, and one of the things that I know we want to talk about empowering parents, but can you, Keisha, talk, and also Paula, can you talk about the importance of writing a parent statement prior to your IEP and why that is so important? And it's a very powerful tool, and it gives parents an opportunity to advocate for their children. In a more personal and intimate way. And I'm sorry, in a personal and intimate way in communicating to the IEP team who your child is, because they're more than just a student ID number, more than their disability. And so if you all can just speak to the power of being able to put together a parent statement to be read and incorporated into your child's educational record.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll start off with I will say that, of course, Morgan being 20, I'm learning a lot of stuff later on in life. So I'm kind of glad that I'm a part of this conversation, because I'm going to come at it from the angle that I was this parent that you guys are educating. Because I was, when Morgan went to school, and I think I've said this several times, I was told that I was coming to an IEP meeting. I wasn't even told what IEP stood for. I did not know anything. I showed up, I pretended like I knew what was going on. The people appeared to be nice. I won't say that I was totally intimidated by the number of people at the table. I think I was more intimidated by the information they were shoving at me, because I did not know. I did not know that it was similar to me getting my son's, like when he goes to a school and he goes into a history class, it was like getting his syllabus. And almost the syllabus telling me, okay, this is what the class is about. This is what Jeremy will be learning. I did not get that with Morgan. I did not feel as though, hey, tell us what you want Morgan to do. When they came up with the different areas, some of those things, like her, I'm just going to say her coloring in the lines, that may have been something I could have said, yeah, I would like to do that. But when you got down and deep with the terminology associated with the special needs, I didn't know any of that. So some of the things that once she went to Kennedy Krieger and some of the goals they were coming up with, that wasn't even a goal I would have even thought to come up with, because I was like, wow, I never even thought about how important it is for her to hold the pen in her hand. And they broke it down. So I will say, coming at the standpoint from a parent that had never been, informed of, no one ever set me down, no one ever told me anything about the IEP meeting. They never told me what to expect. They never told me what to bring to the table. They never told me I was a vital part of the team. I was just totally one of these parents that needed this podcast told to me. And I even go even further, and I said this, Lisa, several times. Extended school year services was denied to my daughter every single year. Every single, I did not I did not know that this was something I could have petitioned. I did not know this was something I should have demanded. They made me think that, oh, she's doing great, so you don't need that. And based off of what the goals were on the paper, it looked like she was doing good. So I say this to all of those parents that's just starting out this process: take advantage of the information that they are given, because I wish I had this information back in the day. I was never told to write a parent impact statement. I was never told to tell me a little bit about Morgan. It was nothing like that. So I'm one of the parents that you guys, I would have loved to have you on my team. Yeah.
I think it's essential to have that robust statement, because you're sitting down with people who, other than outside of the teacher, or if they have a one-on-one, you're sitting down with people who only interact with your child for maybe 30 to 45 minutes, maybe once or twice a week, or maybe just passing by them in a hall. So it's essential to have the statement, because this is where you get to tell who your child is, to tell their strengths, their weaknesses, what motivates them, what you like this, what you would like to see them work on, where you want them to be later on in life, like after school. And you also get to talk about the goals, the things that you want to see your child work on, what needs improvement, what's not working, those type of things. It's, you paint the picture of your child, and you also are painting the picture of who you want your child to become. And without that picture, without that visualization, then you just have people sitting down making decisions for a blank sheet of paper. Yeah.
I love that. That is very important, because what you're doing is introducing them to your child. I love that. And I do say that each year that Morgan went to the another classroom, it's like starting over again, because naturally, I will say the most of the teachers don't stay around long. I don't know if you guys experienced that. So it was like kind of like sometime mid-school year, they were getting another teacher. So the turnover rate is high when it comes to the special needs community. So I do think that that is so important, having people there that are totally familiar with your child's, the likes, the dislikes, the triggers, anything that could potentially trigger them. I think that's very important.
Yeah. And like you said, the IEP team, it changes. Tomorrow's not promised to any of us, so we never know. So it's even more essential that you give great detail, right? You don't want to be vague in your statement. You want to give raw, what's appropriate, because next year's IEP team might be a whole new team. And if you give a vague statement, you don't want to leave a lot of gray area or anything left up to the imagination for anybody who has to read your statement or make decisions on behalf of your child.
That's awesome. I don't know. I find myself getting a little bit emotional because, of course, I had an IEP meeting this week. Because the matter is pending and we're going to be going into another IEP meeting in, I believe, April 8th. I don't want to go into too many details, but this is a very serious issue. I seriously believe that the state of special education in the United States, and in my personal experience in Prince George's County, Maryland, this is a public health crisis, because we have 8 million children across the United States that receive special education services. But it's more than just receiving those services. They deserve advocates to make sure that those services are meaningful and that the IEPs are being implemented as legally agreed upon. So this is a very serious subject to me. Anyone knows me, this is my passion. I'm so thankful to God for giving me this passion and putting me on this journey. While it is a challenging journey every single day, and only those of us who are caretakers of disabled children know what that means. Every single day, it is a challenge, but we are committed to making the difference for this community. So if I can just pivot to the next topic. The next topic is predetermination. And if one of you could put that in the chat, that word predetermination, because I want parents to see it, and then, they can also just go and look it up. But this is a very important term, because one of the cornerstones to special education is parents. We're Supreme Court case even identified us as subject matter experts, for our children. And so predetermination is something that is a very serious issue in special education, but because very few people know what it is, it's rarely raised, discussed, or challenged. But predetermination, just a quick framework, it's the right of parents to participate in developing their child's IEP, and it is a cornerstone of IDEA. This is codified in the Code of Federal Regulations, 34/300.501, subsection B, 34 CFR 300.321, subsection A1, 34 CFR, and that's Code of Federal Regulation 300.503, subsection A. This is very important. You have a right to be a part of the IEP team, and that specifically means developing the IEP. And so this is where I try to get parents to understand that it's more than just getting that draft in the email 5 days before. You have to be a part of the pre-draft process, and you have to assert yourself, not to control the process, but to demand that you are a meaningful participant. And so, for example, the schools should strive to work with parents in an active and meaningful way. And that means asking the parent questions, responding to the parent's input, having someone take notes when the parent is speaking so that all of that the parent's concerns are appropriately documented, so then you can have a meaningful response. And then when appropriate, incorporate the parent's input into the IEP. And that's kind of what we talked about with that parent statement. I'll end with this. Participation, it doesn't mean that you have to agree. The school team members are not required to agree with the parent or change the IEP merely because the parent desires the change. But it's the right to meaningful participation. Merely means that the team must listen to and consider parental input, and if appropriate, revise the IEP on that information. And so for me, the words that jump out there is that it's your right to meaningful participation. And so many parents.
Stop right there real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask now, what do you think? Can you give us an example of, for those that are listening, an example of something that you could ask the school to change, and you all may not agree, and they feel as though, hey, no, that's not something that we feel is something that'll be beneficial for the child. Can you give us an example of that? Because I do think that's a great point that you bring up, is just because you feel as though you want something in the IEP, the school may not agree with that. Can you come up with a scenario where you think that it's a great compromise?
Yes, I'll give you an example, a personal example.
Okay.
So before I understood a lot about the IEP process and I started receiving the IEPs, the ESY section would always be checked no, or no would be typed in there. And so we're going through the meeting, and then, they just kind of blow right past it. Oh no, he's not eligible, because there's always like a facilitator kind of going through the steps of the IEP when you're doing an annual eligibility determination. And so I learned and I became empowered to understand that number one, they'll use language like recommendation. It's not a recommendation, it's an eligibility determination. And that's where Keisha and I, we meet, we understand language is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
So it's eligibility determination. And then there's some specific criteria that is used like a framework to determine if a child is eligible for extended school year services, also known as ESY. And so the predetermination is that when you get there, it's already marked no. They've already made the decision that the child is eligible. So I'm hoping that this is a clear example. And because it's that time of year where ESY decisions are being made across the country, that's why I keep using these ESY decisions. And so it's not enough to just say no. There should be data to support the no.
And the parent should understand, if that parent questions that, they should be able to explain to the parent why that was checked no, instead of us just saying, oh, it's checked no. Like in my case, it was checked no, but I didn't even know to ask. You
Exactly.
as a parent, you need to ask, can you tell me why they were denied for extended school year services? Okay.
Yes, and I'll say this, and then I'm gonna let Keisha take over. I think it's important to have healthy curiosity as a parent, and I think it's okay to ask why.
Yes.
And so what I believe is, just like in the workplace, in the IEP meeting, and school leadership and administrators, they need to offer training, interpersonal communication training to the teachers, and offer communication training to the teachers to understand that just because a parent is asking why, they're not challenging your authority. They're not trying to circumvent the process. They're not trying to control the process. It's a legitimate question. Can you just tell me why you're saying no? And I just want to communicate that, because I think that a lot of times the process becomes adversarial, and it doesn't have to. If we can all learn to understand and respect one another's position. The law is clear. It says the school doesn't have to agree with you, but they do owe you meaningful participation and give you an opportunity to present your data. And we'll talk about that data. It drives the process.
Okay.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to present that example.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to give parents an understanding of, some of the things that you could differ on. And some of the things is good. And then again, I think another thing, and I find that to be really helpful, is I definitely have a good working relationship with all of Morgan's team. And I think that when I question them, and I agree with what you're saying, when it becomes like a cat and mouse game, and it's like it becomes like it's going into an argument, that's where my antennas go up. But I will say, with her team, I have such a great team, and when I ask, they're willing to explain it to me, and then I'm willing to say, okay, well, have we thought about this? Again, that makes me feel as though I'm a part of a team, and it doesn't make me feel like I'm invited, but you just invited, but just sit down and be quiet. Yeah. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, we're not going to do shut up and dribble.
It's key that all team members are valued, right, and respected. Your voice and your opinion matters. And from a medical standpoint, my son had a specialist who always says that the parent, theirs matters the most, because they know their child, and their opinion is the most essential, or that key opinion on the team. I did want to say about the ESY, and you may hear, oh, they're not eligible, and you can say, can you explain? Well, they might explain to you, but you have to always remember, say, can you show me the data that supports what you're saying? Because wording is key. And some people, they have the gift of gab, and they can make flipping a burger sound like they're, cooking a steak. So you want to make sure that they present the data that actually shows like what it is that they're saying. So if they're saying that your child is improving, however, test scores or what you're seeing at home, they're, regressing, we need to have a discussion about this, because now, there's a breach of trust, because what you're saying is not what the data that I collected shows, right? And what you see your child do at home, which you work with your child at home, that's data. Just like what they do at school, that's data. So, I need to see what the data shows. And oftentimes I found or I see a lot, is the data that is presented is not the data that's being talked about.
Mhm.
There's conflict.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say that some of Morgan's goals, I know I'm going to keep bringing Morgan up because that's the only case I know.
we
But
want you to.
one thing that I started doing was when they said that Morgan accomplished a goal, I practiced it at home. And I told them, I said, well, wait a minute, this don't seem. And if you're telling me that you've gotten her to comply 5 times out of 10, then she should be able to do it at home. So don't be afraid, parents, to even put your own test in place at home. Like Keisha is saying, if they did it there, then guess what? They can do it at home. If you're telling me that if I present this to her 5 times and she doesn't do it right any of the times, or she does not accomplish that goal any of the times, then I beg to differ. I'm going to ask for them to do it in front of me with her because maybe she's doing it a little differently because I'm her mom. But don't be afraid to challenge that data. I like that, Keisha.
I think that credibility is everything,
Everything.
in this process. We come into this process with strangers, and so you start from you want to start from a place of mutual respect. But credibility is everything. And so just by way of a personal example, last June 2024, the IEP team agreed to give my son a functional behavior assessment because of some behavior issues that were occurring and interfering with him in school. He was pulled out of class one particular time as a result. So I saw things were really becoming challenging for him. We were also trying to titrate his medication. But the school did not initiate the FBA, which is a functional behavior assessment for our audience, as agreed, which would have been the next month during ESY. And so I had an IEP meeting Tuesday. And then to my surprise, after many, many emails and after a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights with the U.S. Department of Education, after some litigation activity, to my surprise, I was informed that the functional behavior assessment was initiated in early February. I wasn't given a date, and that's February 2025. So approximately 8 months lapsed. And so I'm saying that to say is that credibility is everything, because I'm a member of the IEP team, and no one on the IEP team thought enough of me to bring me into the process.
Now, Lisa, can you tell the listeners why it's so important for him to have received that behavioral analysis? Because I think sometimes people don't know how that plays into their goals. Tell us if he didn't get that, how that would have affected his success with his goals.
Well, since that, okay, so I'll start from this framework. Since the agreement to do it, the legal agreement, and for those of you who don't know, the IEP, the individual educational plan, is a legal contract between the parent and the school. Since that was not implemented, Blake went on into the new school year and he struggled with some behaviors. Fortunately, he wasn't disciplined and he didn't receive any discipline, but that's not the point. What if he would have hurt himself? What if he would have hurt another child? The importance of that functional behavior assessment is to produce a formidable and a solid behavior intervention plan. And so all the adults that work with him would have strategies given to them by the team that's involved in assessing. Strategies, for instance, during transitions, you know, maybe don't confront Blake. Come on, Blake, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. You know, you can't confront him, and you can't kind of keep saying the same thing over and over, because he'll get agitated.
Mm-hmm.
He'll have a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So the behavior intervention plan will give the adults working with him the strategies of how to gain compliance when he's in a heightened behavior state.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates safety for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
for Blake and everyone in the environment, his peers and the adults. For those of you who don't know, I'm 5'7", and he's almost looking me in my eyes. He just turned 11 years old.
Wow.
He's a big kid. He's a big kid. So getting a hold of his behavior is a priority for me, because I understand that as a young African-American male, I understand they're predicting he's going to be at least 6'6" to 6'8". His father is 6'4" and a large man.
Wow.
So I can understand how society is going to perceive him.
Mm-hmm.
And so while the IEP team may be thinking right now, today, I'm thinking about his future and his quality of life. And I'm thinking about how he is going to assimilate into society. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's important.
On a tangent on that.
Yeah.
I want to add to that it's also, you have to be mindful and ask questions, because we want to know who is doing the FBA, who is doing the assessment, right? And we want to know what are their credentials, because regular staff, they don't have the credentials to look for certain things. So when, a school, they may say, well, we've been observing him, or we've been assessing him. Well, who is we, and what are their credentials? Right? Because if I'm just a IA assistant, or if you're the special education teacher, do you have the accreditation to be able to, or the knowledge to know what to look for, to know what are the triggers, to identify the environment, the timing, those type of things? It's not just we're going to observe. So that's something that parents have to be mindful and look out for as well.
Great point. I like that. Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna say that that's with all assessments: speech, OT, physical therapy, all assessments. What are your credentials?
Now, Keisha, can you talk about the assessment and tell people why it's important to get those assessments, and how often? I know that for Morgan, I want to say they do her assessments, I want to say every 2 or 3 years, because she changes. But can you explain why it's so important to have the assessments done?
Yes. So when we think about the IEP, the individualized education plan, we want to assess your child, not somebody else's child. Don't come at me at a meeting and talk about what somebody else's child does or what the class does. We're here for my child or your child. So I need to know my child's capabilities, what he can do, what you believe he can grow to, and we need to decide, how do we get there? We're not going to group him. We can't assess the group. We're here for an IEP, an individualized education plan. We're not here for the budget. Your budget isn't my concern. We're here for my child. And you may get some pushback. And I ask the question, especially if, some therapists might talk about, caseload might prevent this. So is this a budget issue? Because we're not discussing budget and IEP. We're discussing my child's individualized education plan. Budget isn't my concern. Those just something to be mindful of.
Okay, we have a question, guys. I don't know if we'll have the answer for this, because I think we're all kind of feeling our way in the dark. But Lisa or Keisha, if y'all can
Yes.
kind of address that.
Um, if you don't mind, I just want to indulge. Thank you very much, Ms. Stephanie, for that question. I know there's a lot of anxiety in the special
Mhm.
education community
Mhm.
because of the activity that is happening at the U.S. Department of Education. But one thing we do know, we don't know it to be a fact, is that the Office of Civil Rights may be attached to another federal agency. So you still have an opportunity to go on to the Office of Civil Rights, U.S. Department of Education website, and you can still file your complaint. I also implore and encourage parents to go onto the Department of Justice, ADA, American with Disabilities um, website, and there's a link in there, and there's a very user-friendly form, and you can file a complaint there as well. I always say I want the Department of Justice to come in. I want them to do a pattern and practice. We know that that's associated with law enforcement. But what I'm understanding in my research is that there is a statute attached to pattern and practice. And so it's a possibility that we as parents in our community, we have to come together and maybe try to mobilize and get Congress to either expand that statute or either create one for the educational system as it relates to disabled children. Because we have 8 million children in this country. And I'm afraid that no one's watching. The laws have been written. The Supreme Court has recently ruled unanimously, but we don't see the schools comporting themselves in a manner with the decisions and the legal statutes that are in place. And so you ask yourself, why? Because no one's watching. And I strongly believe that we need the Department of Justice to come in and to intervene on behalf of this very vulnerable population. I'm going to answer your question. So I went back earlier today to look to understand that the Department of Justice, it's not just criminal. They do criminal, but there's a civil division. And that civil division has the authority to implement under Executive Order 12250, and it was established November 2nd, 1980 by our wonderful President Jimmy Carter. But it gave the Attorney General, it says, they shall coordinate the implementation and enforcement of executive agencies of various non-discriminatory provisions of the following laws. Of course, Title 7, Title 6, 7, I'm sorry, that's for adults. I'm going to skip down for the children. Title 6 of the Education Amendment of 1972, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act 1973 as amended. And so I'm giving you this information because I need for parents to understand that the Department of Justice, of course, they represent the United States of America. You are a citizen. And so you can ask for the Department of Justice to get involved. And the way we do that is through our complaints. We send those complaints there, and hopefully we're going to get the attention of someone in the Department of Justice sooner or later, that we need them to intervene on our behalf. Yes, we have the state administrative processes. And so, Ms. Stephanie, I hope that answers your question, is that you can still file an administrative complaint. You can still seek a due process hearing. You can still seek mediation. None of that is going to be disturbed by what's happening with the U.S. Department of Education. But I tend to think on a more global level. And sometimes the states are just not equipped to respond to the very serious issues and fractures in the special education system. And so I'm on a more global level. I believe that we need to get our senators, our representatives, state and federal representatives. We need to write letters. We need to, the House and the Senate, they have education committees, and then we have to get the Department of Justice. So Ms. Pamela Bondi is our new Attorney General for the United States of America, and I would hope that we can have her full support in trying to come up with a mechanism to get involved in what I consider to be a public health crisis. And then we have Mr. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, who's it looks like a lot of the processes are going to be transferred under his supervision.
Mhm.
And so we need to get his attention too. And so I don't know, I don't have the answers of how we can do it, but I know that if we just mobilize and we write those letters, we file those complaints and make those phone calls to our elected representatives, we may have an opportunity under this administration.
Yeah, and I do think it's really scary because a lot of stuff is up in the air. I've heard a lot about the 504s being affected,
Mhm.
and I'm pretty sure that's why Stephanie is asking. But I think, Stephanie, at this point, like Lisa said, nothing has been totally settled
Mhm.
or, put into law that will prohibit 504s and IEPs to continue to go forward. So I know I've been reading things, but again, you hear things and then the next day you hear something else, but nothing has been totally settled. So I agree. Until something has been, even then, when something has been settled, we still have to make our voices heard.
Yeah. I just want to double down on what Lisa and what Paula is saying about making sure that your voices are heard. Contact your elected officials, contact your representatives, ask direct questions, call them, send them emails. They'll respond. If they respond with a blanket message, contact them back with direct questions. Ask specific questions of what you want to know because you elected them or they were elected to represent you, and you want to make sure that they actually know how you would be impacted or your child would be impacted, or if your state is even equipped to handle this, right? So ask direct questions, and that way you can get the most informed answer.
And I will say, a lot of our congressmen, they don't even know what 504 or IEP stand for because I saw a town hall meeting the other day and a parent got up and asked about, the fact that her child was on a 504 and how they were going to be affected. He said, "What is that?" So this is where it becomes from a standpoint that we have to educate these people. And like we all are saying, first of all, as we know, you got to be that squeaky wheel.
Mhm.
And a lot of the times they're not, if it's not like something that they have been educated on or they have been faced with it firsthand with their families, they're not going to know about it. But the more that we shove it in their face and keep telling them how they're going to be affected, I think over the years, that's when you get to see results.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Here in North Carolina, yesterday they had the second annual IDD listening session. I wasn't able to make that one, but I actually spoke at the first one last year. And it was very powerful. Like we really had over 500 disabled people coming from all across North Carolina to the state's capital to speak, to our legislators and our elected officials. And I will say that at that first session, there wasn't a lot of representatives who actually showed up, but those who did show up, only a few of them actually had full understanding about IDD and how it impacts individual lives.
Can you tell them what IDD is?
Um, Intellectual developmental disability.
Yes.
And under that, waiver services in North Carolina, the innovations waiver, IDD, TBI, there's a lot of different disabilities that kind of fall under the certain waiver that we kind of spoke to, but this was more specific to IDD. And it's just really key to, even on your local level, like your county, your county representatives, like whoever is your party chairs and those type of things, let them know who you are, who your child is, what works for them and what doesn't work for them. These are your advocates, right? And if they don't know when they're at the table with the money, they don't, oh, nobody's in my district needs this. Nobody, this is not for us.
Mhm.
Let your representatives know who you are, what works, what doesn't work, what you would like to see, what you need, those type of things. I can't tell you enough that there are people who are elected who do not have a clue.
Mhm.
They don't have a clue. They do not have a clue. They do not have a clue of what it takes, the amount of effort and energy it is to be a caregiver. That's why caregivers, they work with the most vulnerable population, but they get paid pennies on a dollar,
Mhm.
if pennies. Let people know. Look, I'll pull my calendar out and I'll say I'm free this day, this day, this day, this day. What day would you like to come and see or actually assist?
Mhm.
Let these people know.
I just wanted to that's outstanding. And for those of you who don't know, Keisha is a caregiver. We're all caregivers. We're
Mhm.
just on different phases of our journey. Um, but one of the things I wanted to talk about individual educational evaluation. It's known as an IEE. IEE. Most people don't know what it is. It's buried down in the procedural safeguards. Um, but it is an opportunity, and I'm just pivoting, going back to the credibility issue of the IEP team. And when, as Keisha eloquently stated, when trust is broken, as a parent, you have a right to request an IEE in whatever domain you're looking for. And the IEE, that means that the school, at the cost of taxpayers, the parent has a right to request an IEP, and then it will go through an um, approval process. And then you can select, or the school may have vendors, independent vendors, providers outside of the school district to actually conduct those assessments that we're talking about. So if have issues or credibility, you have a question about the validity, the reliability of the testing data, and even the way the test and the data is being gathered, you have issues with that. If you feel that you're being harassed or retaliated against, all of these different reasons, you want to put that down in writing. That's the only caveat. It has to be in writing. You can't just say it verbally in an IEP meeting. You have to put it in writing. And so you can request for an IEE, and it will be paid for at the cost of taxpayers, which is by the school. And so if you would like to have a specific provider, a specialist. We live in Maryland, so we have Kennedy Krieger. That's like our gold standard. So if you need psychoeducational testing, if you need behavior testing, or whatever kind of assessment you want, it can be done outside of the school district. And then that report is paid for by the school district and then brought into the IEP process. So IEE, individual educational evaluation. And that's a right that a lot of parents don't know because it's buried in the procedural safeguards. And one of the things I have an issue with the procedural safeguards is that it's just a lot of information in a little bitty tiny font, and very few people read it. I just happened to be a nerd and I read it. And that's how I started to become empowered and learn about my rights. And I know we're short on time. I just want to share, we're working with a family out of Texas, and we have a wonderful, wonderful mom and dad who is supporting their child. She got my attention. One thing she does is she videos her child. So when Keisha was saying and Paula were saying the progress report is saying one thing, but I'm not seeing this happen at home. She videos her child. And so I want to offer that to our audience today. Video your child. That's a method of collecting data. And so when you need to maybe challenge or confront, and I don't mean confront in a negative way, the team about data or something that they're reporting, that's an extra tool that you can have to gather your data and to present that data and show them what your child is able to do at home. So, I just really want to give a shout out to that mom in Texas because she got my attention, because I'm going to start doing that as well.
I used to do that with Morgan when I started getting to the place that I understood that something's not right. And I started taping her and giving it to them. And of course, they tried to say, well, she's going to function differently at home than she would at school. I said, well, then tape her at school doing it because I want to see it. I mean, you're right. There's a different Morgan at home than at school, but then tape it and show me. I want to see it. I just don't want to see that she's accomplished this goal and that goal and this goal. And then, I'm not seeing any of when she goes to the next school year, I'm still not seeing any of the things she's accomplished. And I will say one thing that drew my attention was that they said that she recognized the letters of her name. And I was like, great. Oh, I was so excited. But when the next year came, they put that as another goal. And I said, wait a minute. I mean, guys, this is when the light bulbs start going off in my head. And I said, wait a minute. You guys told me that she accomplished that last year. No, we didn't. I said, yes, you did. Yeah, now I don't remember everything because I remember I got excited about that thing. They swore up and down, no. Then they told the person, go look for it. I said, yeah, you go look for it because I'm going to go home and get my paperwork. Do you know, parents, I just want y'all to know how powerful you are in those meetings. Do you know they came back and said, oh, you're right. Oh, we didn't even pay attention. They did, but they were trying to get that past me. So what I say is sometimes as parents, you have to question things. And sometimes even when you feel like you're deficient, you're like, you got to pay attention to this stuff because they started recycling those goals and making me think, oh, she accomplished that. And then they kept recycling it. So I'm like, parents, I would tell anybody, I didn't know anything, but I knew they said she had accomplished it. and my radars go up when you tell a lie. I don't know why that happens, but I said from that point on, I didn't trust anything they said. No.
What is it, Lisa? The cookie cutter where they copy and paste? Like, I feel like that's the standard for not all, but so many school districts. Like you see copy paste. Literally, I could be going over a student's IEP, and it'll have a whole nother student's name or information in IEP. Like you're literally copying and pasting it.
Yeah, it happened to me before. I was like, wait a minute, I got somebody else's document. Oh no, we didn't mean. Yeah, because you copied and pasted that goal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are running short on time, but one of the things I do want to mention is recording IEP meetings. School districts, they don't like it. I don't care. You don't have to give them a notice. You can say it the day of, or I like to give a day notice that I would like for the meeting to be recorded. Either they're going to record if you record, so you can record yourself, or you can allow them to record and just request a copy of the recording. I like the recording because the note taker don't always take good notes.
Very important.
I'm waiting after every IEP meeting. The standard is only 5 days before you get your IEP. I'm reading through it because I want to know, some don't want to show you what they've written. I want to know what you wrote down. But if it's recorded, we don't have to worry about it. And you will see body language shift. I've seen where parents have been kind of persuaded not to record the meetings or have the meetings recorded. They put so much effort into, you don't have to worry about it. It's just, nothing's going to go outside of this room. It's just us, it's not even about that. This is about making sure that we paint the full picture. You want the full lens of your child, right? And the next IEP team because it might not be the same team that's here. Should they need to go back, they have more than just a one-page notes of a meeting that took place that lasted 1, 2, 3, and I reached my first all-time max 5 hours. So no, seriously, like literally in a 5-hour IEP meeting that accomplished nothing. Let me just say that. But they're not going to have multiple pages of notes. They're going to have one, maybe 1.5. You're lucky to have 2 of notes. That's a lot of data, a lot of meat that's not on within the IEP. And next year's IEP team though doesn't have enough meat to eat so that they can be full and plan for the next year. Right? So record the parents' requests in writing, record those meetings.
And request your copy after the meeting.
I love it.
Directly after the meeting.
Yeah.
I thought this was important to put on the screen. Never, 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 never attend your IEP meeting alone. I love it.
Never. I liken it, and you guys have probably heard me say this before, I liken it to being in a Senate confirmation hearing. You see that the person who's going up for the position to be confirmed, they're sitting at a table, and then they have 30 Congress people asking them questions. It's very intimidating, and I really hope that we can reimagine what IEP meetings look like. And I really hope that we have educators or superintendents, leadership that can really take a bold step forward and try to reimagine what this experience is for parents, because it's emotional, it can be intimidating, it can be adversarial, and it can be hostile. It can be a hostile work environment. It is really, really, really a very challenging part of this process. My IEP meeting was Tuesday. Sunday, I didn't sleep well. Monday, I didn't sleep at all. I laid on the couch at 3:30 in the morning, back up at 6 because of the anxiety of having to be it all, having to be everything, while they get to bring in subject matter experts for speech, occupational therapy, reading, math, general education, special education. They get to bring in a subject matter expert, a psychologist, but we have to be it all.
Yes, we do.
And it's something that we really need to think about. I'm hoping that administrative professionals, educational professionals can really try to understand what this process is and the impact that it has on parents who are in these meetings, literally trying to get services for their children that they're legally entitled to. So I know we're done, but if you live in Maryland,
and we definitely have to have a part 2. And I think another part to this would be putting out a request for parents to send in questions. I think that would be awesome to have questions in advance, and we could definitely go down to ask the questions. Answer.
We'll let them know. Keisha and I are volunteer ambassadors. We can't save all 8 million, but we do have a roster. We do attend nationwide meetings thanks to Zoom. But if you live in Maryland, your ESY decision needs to be made. I believe it's like April, the date has escaped me. It's like April 18th. I can't call it, but it needs to be made within the next few weeks. Yeah. And so therefore, if you're not satisfied with the decision, you'll have an opportunity to seek redress. And that redress generally takes 60 days. So make sure that you are in contact with your team. And we'll talk about ESY some more later. It's one of my favorites.
We need to have a show specifically on ESY.
It's one of my favorite subjects.
And guys, before we close out, I have to say this, and I feel like it's vital. I want everybody to know that state law does not trump federal law. State law does not trump federal law. I literally was in an IEP meeting with a school district in North Carolina, and they said, we don't do it like that here. Several times on a recorded meeting.
30 times.
Does not, yes, these are all central office people, like they came 20 plus strong.
Yes.
State law does not trump federal law.
I'm going to put that in the comments.
Any day. This was a great session. I feel like we need a part 2, 3, 4,
I
5.
agree.
It's so much information to give. And Lisa and I are definitely going to be working on getting some information packets out there for parents to have to arm yourself with, so that when you go to the table that you are prepared.
Y'all, this was awesome. I feel like I learned something as a parent. I'm still learning about this IEP process. Again, I wish I had you two sisters to go in there with me when Morgan was younger. But again, I always come back to this is where Advocacy was birthed from. My lack of knowledge, my lack of understanding. And I felt like I didn't want any other parent to go through this on what I went through. So, and I will say that God did bless me with a good team of people that start loving and caring for her just like I did. But everybody doesn't have that. They don't. So for me, guys, I just want to say thank you. Again, I'm so grateful to these ladies for being a part of our team. They bring such knowledge about all of the special needs laws and the processes. So we definitely would love to have another show to discuss this. But parents, those that are listening, those that's going to listen a little later, send us some of your things that you would love to talk about with the IEP process, or with the extended school year process, with the 504 process, with the IEE process, with the IEP process. Send us your questions so that we can take and be prepared when we come on to address your individual questions. I think that would be a great show. So if that's something that we present to you now, hopefully in a couple of months we can definitely get it, if not beforehand, because we definitely want to start. A lot of parents are preparing for their putting their IEPs in place for next year. So we definitely, and then extended school year services, like you said, what's the deadline for that? Okay, I put you on the spot, but it's sometime in April.
Anybody have a calendar? Let me just look.
You said what?
It's different per state or district, because it's dependent on the calendar year. And I also want to add that if people send questions in, include your state, because we have state law as well.
That's a great point.
For Maryland, it's going to be April 21st. And so wherever you are in the country, look at your last day of school and count backwards 60 days. And that's going to be the date that your determination, the eligibility determination has to be made. And because if you don't agree with it, then you can take regress and hopefully get to the answer that you're looking for.
And another important thing that I wanted to say is we're revising our website where we're having a resource tab. We want to have it based off of, we want to include information for each state, because as we know, each state functions differently. So we would definitely trying to create a resource tab, and we're going to definitely include it by state. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much. I think this was a great session. I think we could go on and on and on, but the night will not permit, and neither will my sleepy eyes. But again, we thank you ladies for joining us. I thank you for being a part of our team. And with that being said, I guess we'll see everybody back on next Thursday. All right. Everybody have a great weekend.
Be blessed.
Yes.